Right, this whole activity, color coding different types of cells, is so that we can compare and contrast ways that different kingdoms or even domains of cells are alike and ways that they are different. So I used to just do plant cells and animal cells, and students got the misconception that those were the only types of cells that had organelles, and that's not true. So then I added the bacteria, and students got a misconception that bacteria, you could tell them because they had a flagella, and that's not true, because there are other cells that have a flagella, or a flagellum, however sometimes I pronounce it. But so we have 5 different cells. We have a bacteria cell, which could be in the domain of archaea or your eubacterias, kingdom archaeobacteria, eubacteria rather. We have a euglena, which is in the kingdom of Protista. You also have things like protozoas that are in the same kingdom, algae, stuff like that. And then we have fungus, which is yeast, like you would use to make bread. What you may not realize is that when you make bread, the reason the bread rises is because the yeast is producing the waste air, and that's what makes your wonderful yeast rolls rise up. And then we have an animal cell and a plant cell. So we're going to color first the things that all cells have. So you're going to need some map pencils, and the first one that you're going to need is dark blue. Okay, I did skip over one thing. All cells have a cytoplasm. Cytoplasm, we say here, is going to be colored white. We're not coloring anything. It's just the gel that's inside of the cell. It's already white on the page. So we're not actually coloring cytoplasm white, but realize that all cells, whether it be bacteria, which is a prokaryote, or a eukaryote, they all have white. It's actually clear, but on here we're going to color it white. We're not going to bother with the white pencil. The next one we're going to go to is cell membrane, and we're going to make our key over here dark blue. Cell membrane is the innermost layer of the outside of a bacteria. They actually have 3 layers. They have a cell membrane, they have a cell wall, and then they have a capsule around the outside of that. So there's the cell membrane in the bacteria. The euglena, the cell membrane is just this thin layer on the outside. And so you're going to go around, you're going to color all of that on the euglena, and you're going to color in your key. You're going to do the same thing on your yeast. Now, yeast have a cell wall. Many fungus have a cell wall. So inside of that edge, you're going to color the cell membrane. There's the yeast cell membrane. On the plant cell, they have a cell wall, so cell membrane is going to be along the inside edge of the plant cell. So there is the cell membrane on the plant cell in dark blue. And finally, this outside, because animal cells don't have a cell wall, the outside edge here is going to be the cell membrane on the animal cell. So we're going to color that dark blue. So all cells have a cell membrane. The next thing that all cells have is ribosomes. So with a black, you're going to find these little teeny tiny dots inside, floating in the cytoplasm. These make proteins, and every cell needs to be able to make proteins. So you're going to have ribosomes in every kind of cell. So your euglena has ribosomes, and your yeast has, you'll just have to reinforce the little dots. They have lots and lots of them. You may want to not try to color every single one of these little pinpoint dots, but these are all ribosomes. So all of these have ribosomes. When we go to our plant and animal cells, they have ribosomes. Now, because this is a more cartoon-like picture, they look bigger, but they're all about the same size. They're just teeny tiny little dots, and you have those in animal cells, you have them in plant cells, you have them in bacteria, protists, fungus. All cells have ribosomes. They are an organelle. The function is that they make proteins and they do not have a membrane around the outside of them. All right, the next thing that we're going to color is DNA. In a prokaryote cell, a bacteria is an example, they have what's called circular DNA, meaning that it's like a string that you used to play with when you were playing string games. So remember when you used to have like string and you would say, put your hand in there, okay. Well, this is just one circular piece, imagine, of DNA, and then it's all been kind of squashed together, and it kind of looks like that here in the center. There's no nuclear membrane around it, so it's not in a nucleus, but we're going to color the DNA a light purple. And so this area, sometimes you'll hear it called nucleoid. I don't do that in middle school because kids tend to get those things mixed up. But the circular DNA is floating in the cytoplasm in a bacteria. In our euglena, we have a nucleus, and in that nucleus we're going to add with DNA, because the nucleus is what holds the DNA in a eukaryotic cell. We're going to color the nucleus a light purple, so just that whole little circular area there is light purple. Here we also add with DNA. Notice this one has two nucleuses, or the word is nuclei. That's because this yeast is in the process of reproduction, asexual reproduction. It made a bud, it made a perfect clone copy of itself, and that's going to eventually break off and become its own new cell. But so you have two nucleuses in that one. And then here we have our animal cell has a nucleus. It also has DNA in it, so we're going to add that to our paper. So all cells don't have a nucleus, but all cells have DNA, and those that have nucleuses, that's where the DNA is located. Okay, so the things that cells have in common, they all have cytoplasm, they all have ribosomes, they all have a cell membrane, and they all have DNA. It's just that sometimes the DNA is in a nucleus and sometimes it is not. Now we're going to talk about cell walls. You're going to need a dark green. So this layer outside of the cell membrane is the cell wall. It's not the exterior layer though. Bacteria actually have something called a capsule, kind of like the medication you take, like a Tylenol capsule, look like a little pill. It's a hard coating, a hard shell on the outside. So the cell wall is just inside of that. Euglena do not have a cell wall. We do have fungus that has a cell wall, so we're going to color dark green this outside edge around the cell membrane. So we've got our yeast has a cell wall, and then our plant has a cell wall right outside of the cell membrane. So notice plant cells are not the only ones that have cell walls, but if you were asked, is it plant or animal, plant would be the one with the cell wall. But they're not the only ones that have cell walls. Fungi have cell walls, bacteria have cell walls, and that's for their protection. Next, the flagella or the flagellum. We're just going to use our pencil and color it gray. That's the tail looking thing. There can be more than one. They are used for locomotion or movement. Locomotion means movement. Their mode of locomotion means how do they move? Well, this would be with a flagella.